One Friday evening, I found myself at the pub with my British colleagues for the very first time. How many of you have been to Friday night drinks? Well, suspect most of you have. But for me, that was a brand new experience. I had just joined a new industry in a big investment bank as a junior graduate. Conversations started to flow, glasses started to empty. I was observing keenly. Growing up in China, we would go out for a nice meal with colleagues. Up to that point, I thought I was well-liked, well-accepted, and occasionally enjoyed the spotlight of being funny in social gatherings. I didn't know I was only funny in China. At this British pub, someone told a story. Everyone laughed. I didn't get it, and I was stone-faced. That was a bit embarrassing. Then someone else told the story. I was so keen to laugh this time. I was the only one who laughed, and no one else did. That was very embarrassing now if I've experienced it. But the night got even worse when it was my turn to tell the story. And I shared that before joining the firm, I considered being a comedian, because back home, people said to me I was funny. That's when they all started to laugh, until they realized that wasn't actually the joke. I was serious. To which they responded with, "Lin, you have definitely made the right career choice. That is in investment banking." At this point, I should really give you a little bit of background. My talk today is about how to learn, unlearn, and relearn the art of being different. And I want to share with you some personal stories. But first of all, how did I end up in this British pub all the way from China? Well, let me take you right from the beginning. I distinctly remember my first interaction with the West. I was about 4 years old, and it was the first time I saw this Western TV advert. It was a Head & Shoulders shampoo advert. I was intrigued as I was to find out what dandruff really was, because back then the whole of China didn't have such a concept. I was equally amazed by the advancement this commercial represented. It was back then, despite my very young age, I said to myself, I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to be part of that world. It was the same curiosity that drove me through education, learning English, achieving a degree, and having a career in the UK. At some level, that little girl's dream came true. I mean, at least I don't have any dandruff, right? But back to this Friday night drinks, I kept trying to join the conversation. I kept finding myself having no idea how to. I also couldn't understand why one had to stand all night with no food available at all. Why did they all choose to suffer? At the end of the evening, physically, I was tired and hungry, but that was nothing compared to emotionally. I felt isolated, incompetent, and so different from everyone else. And that's when this was one of my first experience of being an outsider for team activities, alongside a series of confusions towards rounders, quiz nights, and secret Santa. That's when I realized that a simple team bonding experience that is well-intentioned could turn into a real advantage for those who can naturally participate and a disadvantage for those who can't. Why am I telling you this? Well, I think we have all experienced being different, an outsider from time to time. When we don't fit in, often we think there is something wrong with us. But today, I want to share a personal journey of mine by uncovering the 3 questions I had along the way. First, about myself. Second, about our workplace. And third, about our society. By the end of the talk, I hope you will feel empowered to celebrate your differences, to build better systems, to unlearn and relearn this art of being different. So let's begin. The first question I asked myself was, growing up in China, I always wanted to be different. I wanted to stand out from the crowd. Then how come working and living in the UK, I felt so desperate to be the same as everyone else? You see, as Chinese, we face an interesting transition from the majority, the 1.4 billion people, to becoming a minority in the UK. Race is not a concept back home because everyone is Chinese. But as I step into the Western workplace, I fell into the gender and the ethnic minority categories. I realized people's perceptions of me were very different from what I was used to before. For example, as a Chinese person working in finance, I must be really good at math, really good at exams. I didn't know that, but not untrue. I'll take it. But then the number of times that people think I have a national advantage over ping pong was just staggering. Never mind, I know nothing about the sport. If you want to win, please do not invite me to your teams. At work specifically, there is also a big challenge, what is known as a bamboo ceiling. What that means is East Asians have one of the lowest chances of rising to management. If you're an East Asian woman, the cultural factors could be 4 times worse than the gender factors. I thought the glass ceiling was bad enough. The East Asians were said to be most likely to be hired, but least likely to be promoted to management. There are many reasons for this. One key factor is this difference in belief. In the West, the common belief, especially in many American multinationals, is this squeaky wheels get the grease. Whereas in China and many East Asians, we believe the direct opposite, and that is the loudest bird gets shot. I have experienced this firsthand. I vividly remember when I first started working. About 6 months into my role, I was called into this meeting room by my manager, who said, "Lin, I have noticed something. You seem to have some good ideas one-on-one. How come you never said anything in team meetings?" I was stunned by his question because I was paying him my respect as a junior member of the team. He said, "Oh no, it doesn't work like that. You need to speak up." So I did. The first few times I tried to speak up, my heart was pounding so badly. It went against everything I had believed in. I was that bird that was about to get shot. Nevertheless, I said something and I persisted. And about 6 months later, I was called into the same meeting room by my manager, who said, "Lin, I've noticed something. You spoke up. And you showed me absolutely no respect now, and that is great." Well, for the record, I am not encouraging anyone to disrespect their boss. It can be a dangerous career strategy. But I think what this highlights is why the bamboo ceiling exists in the first place. You see, when I didn't speak up in meetings, 3 things were happening in my mind. 1, I was paying my respect. 2, I was waiting for my cue because it was considered rude to jump in. And 3, I was still thinking because we were brought up to only speak up when answers were perfect. It took me years to understand the parallel universe between me and my colleagues. They also had 3 things in their minds. 1, I didn't have any views. 2, I was not confident. Or 3, I had poor communication skills. Those are pretty damaging perceptions for anyone in our organizations. No wonder we couldn't be leaders. Years later, as I became a leader myself, I realized that difference in belief does not equate to lack of abilities. So to my earlier question, do I have to be the same as everyone else? No, I don't. I don't have to change who I am. What I need is to adapt my style, a set of behaviors in meetings, and that is a very liberating thought. But as I have been so busy adapting myself all this time, I couldn't help wondering, why do we have to be the loudest birds to be heard in the first place? And who are our organizations set up for? Let's think about this. When today's organizations were set up, it was by and large to support an ideal type of worker. If I ask you to think of a leader, what images come to mind? Typically, this is somebody who is a male. But it's not just a male, but a middle-class, tall, white, straight male. And it has profound implications beyond surface. They are the people who are most likely to engage in a competitive, assertive, or aggressive or dominant behaviors to get ahead at work. They are the loudest birds. They are most likely to treat their job their number one priority in life. And they're least likely to have dependent care responsibilities like children or elderly parents. This is what our organizations were set up for. Like the madman in the 60s, it wasn't with everyone in mind. And why it matters is this. If you walk in and you fit almost by default, it is easier for you to navigate the system, to find networks, to be sponsored, to advance at work. But the reverse is also true. The more ways you deviate from the ideal standard, the more challenges you are going to experience at work. And this explains my experience in meetings, because back home, I was in the majority. I fit with the ideal. So if I walk into a meeting room in China, people would assume, leader, until I prove otherwise. Whereas if I walk into a meeting room here in the UK, people would assume I am not the leader until I prove otherwise. We know career success comes to accumulation of those small advantages, so this assumption of what leaders look like really matters. And this led me to more research into the issues this ideal leadership causes. Let's take gender, and the classic example comes from the book, The Invisible Woman. One giant tech company had a problem. When it comes to promotion, women were nominating themselves the same rate as men. Well, this is hardly surprising because women were socialized this way growing up, but this tech company was surprised. To their credit, they did try to fix it, but how they fixed it was interesting. Instead of fixing the bias system, their solution was to fix the women. Soon enough, senior women were asked to host workshops to teach other women to be more confident. In other words, they're asking women to be more like men, the ideal loudest men. But research has shown that women tend to assess their intelligence accurately, whereas men of average intelligence think they're smarter than 2/3 of the people because they were socialized this way growing up. That being the case, perhaps it wasn't women's rate nominating themselves were too low. It was that men's that were too high. Our examples today focus on the cultural and the gender factors and the intersections of both, but there are many factors that can make almost anyone deviate from the ideal, like speaking English as a second language, being the first generation in a multinational workplace, lower socioeconomic background, being an introvert, or even body types like tallness for men or attractiveness for women. So to summarize my second question, who are our organizations set up for? Well, it wasn't with everyone in mind. This ideal exists in many layers. That Friday night drink was fundamentally about access. Access to my colleagues, to my bosses, and all the unspoken rules to advance at work. Being different shouldn't be the problem, because powerful leadership should be accessed by both men and women, extroverts and introverts, the squeaky wheels and the loudest birds. As business leaders, we can't just conform to just lean in. We need to unlearn and relearn what good leadership looks like. We need to build better systems. Recently, I reached another milestone of my journey. I became a mother of 2 very young children. To begin with, I now have a new series of cultural confusions. What is show and tell? What is I spy? And what is nativity? When I said this to people, they thought I was making another joke until I assured them I was not. And I really had no idea why my son was the donkey. They say when a child was born, so was the mother. And in my case, it couldn't be truer. Growing up, we believed that success was everything. But now as a working mother, I added another layer to be different from the ideal. And this zero-sum mentality between work and life means if I want to be a better professional as I did before, I will have to be a worse mom. So this depressing prospect has led me to my third and final question today, and that is, what is the ideal for success? And whose standard is this anyway? Upon a closer look, I realized that we were sold on this idea that success in career means success in life. Our self-worth is our net worth, and our need for validation means we forget any other possibilities exist. So my final answer on my current journey is to encourage you to think about success differently. We can start by thinking of success as layered, nuanced, and ever-changing. It's in all shapes and sizes in work and in life. Reject the idea that success has to be big with a check and title attached and can't be the small accumulative success that comes with the journey. Reject the idea that success can't be celebrated when you didn't achieve that end goal. Success is not all or nothing. And finally, reject the idea that success is only reserved for that very few, the perfect-looking people on the Head and Shoulders advert. Everyone can access their own success. When I look back, being in the UK has been a challenging but enriching experience. As you can see, I haven't improved much on being funny, most likely making a really bad comedian. But I did get a lot better at drinking on Friday nights. I thought the longest journey I took was from the east to the west, from China to the city of London. But now I realize it was between my head and my heart. That 4-year-old me, standing in front of the TV, having the dream of being in the West. But that dream has evolved as well. It is no longer about just achieving success, but to discover ourselves, to celebrate our differences, and with that sense of mission, to define the emerging identities of our generation. In the world imagined, I want everyone to embrace the idea that becoming a successful person is a process, not an event. We're more than what can be measured, more than the sum of our achievements. We're more than our identities. We are everything at once. Just as 1,000 miles begins with a single step, we want to reject the ideal, enrich the default, and normalize the differences. Let's join forces on this journey to learn, unlearn, and relearn the art of being different every day. Thank you very much.